People can hear me. Fantastic. Thank you very much. So you're not going to hear much from me today. I'm here to do a little bit of a preamble and help support Ollie with the content. For those that don't know me, I am Barry Coombs, CTO here at Cascade, and largely I spend most of my time looking at our strategy here at Cascade, but equally advising our clients of the strategies that they should be doing. I've got a fantastic team of technologists here, such as Ollie. Ollie, I don't know if you just want to do a very quick introduction, just as you went to take a sip of tea, as to who you are and why you're talking on the subject before I finish my introductions.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Ollie. I've been with Cascade, obviously formerly Computer World, for about 10 years now, which is a long time. Prior to that, I've been IT manager for a law firm in Cheltenham. And I've been in and around technology, particularly Microsoft technology, for all of my working career, actually. So we're talking, I don't know, there's a few grey hairs coming in here sometime, let's say. So yeah, my focus now really is on Microsoft 365, Intune, modern management, and those sorts of technologies, although my technology goes back to, Windows NT, Active Directory, all the on-prem stuff that we've had for a long time.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ollie. And yeah, don't get Ollie talking about the history of computing. He will happily bend your ear for a long time. So today we're all talking about Microsoft 365 and the security mistakes that we see on a regular basis. We all know that Microsoft 365 is now an intrinsic tool that we're using day in, day out, more than just email, with Teams calling, SharePoint being tools that we're increasingly trusting on a regular basis. Obviously, we are seeing inside the technology industry massive innovation, massive change happening at the moment when it comes to AI. So one of the things that we are seeing a lot at the moment is lots of businesses not necessarily focusing on the AI. Some people are dabbling with it. Copilot for Microsoft 365 is a fantastic tool. If you'd like to understand how that could help your business specifically, reach out to Megan. She does some great art of the possibles aligned to sectors. Certainly if you're from legal, accountancy, or any of the other sectors we work with, we can demonstrate it in real terms how people in your industry are working. But people know that AI is going to play an important role in their business. So they are considering their journey to AI. What do they need to be doing now to get ready for this journey to AI? Whether it is, well, you've done the first stages of a Microsoft 365 migration, but you've got lots of files still left on the file server that you really need to get into SharePoint. Now is the time people are getting on with those projects. But increasingly, AI is both an opportunity and a risk. And lots of what we're going to talk today are the basics inside Microsoft 365 that you need to consider where you are on that journey. What are your settings today? Some of the things Ollie is going to talk about, maybe advanced security features you should be looking at, but quite a lot of them are misconfiguration items that Ollie sees on a regular basis inside of his role. And Microsoft don't always get these things right as well. Much of what Ollie is going to talk about and demonstrate might be default settings that are there that really are not the most optimized security settings you should be using. So I think without any further ado, I'm going to pass over to Ollie. If you'd like to talk to us about where you are on your Microsoft 365 journey, about improving the security in Microsoft 365, at the end of the webinar, and I'm sure Megan will paste it in the chat, we're happy to do a complimentary review from both a strategy and a security perspective. This isn't a kind of salesy pitch. This is an opportunity to spend some time with Ollie, understand where you are, help put a roadmap together. And you know what? If you do want our help, we're there to help as well. So watch out for that. It will be in the chat. It will also be in the end as well. So Ollie, why don't you get us started with the first mistake you see?
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Barry. Brilliant. Thanks, Megan, for advancing the slides. We're back into the sort of pre-COVID sort of mode of 2020. Asking for the next slide, please, because for whatever reason, my slide deck isn't working. So thank you. So mistake number one, it's really not exploring the features you already have access to. So you might have Microsoft 365 Business Premium already, which gives you a lot of extra tools for the amount of money that you're paying. But maybe you're not using all of those things. Maybe you're looking to upgrade or make that upgrade. Maybe you've actually got the Microsoft 365 E3 suite already. But I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that we're talking security today, a couple of things that you may not be using already. So next slide, please. So the first of those is actually managing devices with Intune. So we talk to a lot of customers who might say, oh, yeah, we're already using Intune. But when you actually dig into it in some depth, maybe they're just using it for Windows. Maybe they're just using it for the mobile devices. Maybe they're not using it across the board. Maybe they're not deploying applications in it. So there's a lot of capabilities in Intune that we find people don't always use. So Intune's obviously modern management. managing stuff in a modern way, if you're using group policy and Active Directory, those tools have been around 20 years. They were designed for a completely different era. We're not in that era now. Devices are not connected to the network typically all the time. With group policy, if you deploy an application or a setting, you've got no assurance that that setting has actually made it out to the devices at all. So with Intune, you know the settings have taken place, you know what the state of the device is, you can measure compliance of those devices and do some interesting things with them. Next slide, please. This is an interesting one. So Purview. Purview is a big group of technologies. I think there's about 17 different solutions sat under the Purview banner. But two of the interesting ones are information protection and data loss prevention. So information protection, just to start with that one very briefly. That's had a lot of different names going back a lot, and Barry told me not to get on the history of computing, but going back to Windows Server 2003 is where actually the roots of that information protection stuff came about. It's completely changed, you know, it being hosted in Azure and Microsoft 365 now. But that's really about labeling data. So labeling your Word, Excel, PowerPoint documents and labeling emails, and then applying controls to those things that you've labeled. So a very, very basic example we've got in the screenshot there. And we use this. This is taken from our internal systems. This is how we do it at Cascade. We've got a sensitivity label on that email called internal only. And it's not applying any of the advanced encryption options on that particular label, although we do use those features. But what that is doing is combined with a DLP rule. We're saying if that internal only labeled document crosses the boundary or tries to cross the boundary to the external world, we're going to block it. We're going to bring up a policy tip for the user and tell them their action has been blocked and actually stop that email going out. We've all done this. We've all sort of typed somebody's name, intending to type an internal person's name, and we type an external person and accidentally send that email out to somebody who shouldn't be receiving that information. That's a really, really simple way of blocking that action. So yeah, advanced features you've got with information protection as well. It's got some encryption built into it. So we also have at Cascade a confidential label that you can apply there. And we know that only the people who are recipients of that document or that email can actually access the data in it. Even if we copied that Word file potentially onto a memory stick, left it in the car park, and somebody picked it up, only the people who actually have the use rights and can get that encryption done can actually access the data. Next slide.
Ollie, I think on information protection and DLP, I believe, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong, an important part of this also happens with that AI in the future. So AI is fantastic. It allows you to find things quickly. There's two parts to this. It allows things to be found quickly. So it's important that the clarity around the security around the documents is there. You can't have security by obscurity, and I think you've probably got some bits a little bit later about that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but equally it respects what labels are on documents. So when you go create me a new document and base it upon this document, you are unable to kind of, or unable by default to go, I'm creating an external document and use all this secret internal stuff to power this document. Yes, you can allow the users to then change it, but that will then be logged in the system. You've made this change. Why did you make this change? So it will then be auditable from that perspective. Yeah,
so by default, Microsoft 365 Copilot won't touch encrypted documents. So basically just exclude that and not have visibility of them by default. But and we'll come on to this later, but with Copilot, you can sort of segment what it can look at. So if there are particular SharePoint libraries that you know are badly structured, you can tell Copilot, you know, not to touch that area, or if it's inappropriate to harvest information from that particular SharePoint library or team. Cool, thank you. Yeah, so mistake number 2.
So on that, sorry, Ollie, on that first point then, just to reflect on the first point. So 2 really important points here. First of all, you're already spending the money to get these features. Microsoft 365 is quite feature rich, and we see this not only in the security portfolio, but in the productivity portfolio, that people are typically not making use of not necessarily all the features that would benefit them. This isn't about taking every feature and shoehorning it into a business. It's about looking what is important. The 2 areas you've explored there, the first one about Intune, it's about an asset register primarily, not a complete asset register. It's alive. There might be various different forms, but certainly the likes of the NCSE, one of their critical steps that you should be doing in the 10 steps of cybersecurity is having an asset register, knowing where things are, where they are. And this allows you to do that for every kind of device, your mobile device, your Windows device, and the levels of maturity that you've got there. But your second type of asset is your data. So being able to then expand that and look at how you're protecting your data is really important. So I think two really important features there. Those that, and I've got to be honest, these are areas that we're seeing lots of customers come to at the moment. They might have dabbled with them, but they're going, we know we've not got it quite right yet. We want to get this to a level of maturity, Intune basics, all the way through to fully automated autopilot deployments and things like that.
Thanks, Barry. So yeah, mistake number 2. So GAPI conditional access. So conditional access is a feature that a lot of you are going to have access to. If you've got some of the basic licenses like Business Basic, Business Standard, you won't have this. I'll come on to that. But conditional access is all about setting policies to define what data people can get access to and how, essentially. So one of the basic uses of conditional access is to apply MFA in a nice way. And we see, I look at a lot of 365 tenants and I see mistakes. So one of the mistakes I've seen with applying MFA is not actually applying it to all offices. So you maybe start small, you put an MFA on an office by office basis, and I had a customer come to me and say, look, we don't think this is working. We actually looked at the rules and actually the groups and the assignments were incomplete. It wasn't covering everyone. So next slide, please, actually, if we can. Again, thank you. So a lot of the time it's about those rules actually just not covering every use case, not covering every device type, or not covering every user. And we also see people doing assigning a policy to, let's say, Mac OS or Windows and requiring something about that Mac OS or Windows. Maybe they're requiring a compliant device, but then forgetting about the other device types. So those people can just sail straight past those conditional access policies. So conditional access policies you can get. We see people with like 20, 30 policies sometimes at the high end, and it gets really difficult to then to track what you have. So really take a look at what you have in terms of conditional access and how those policies are actually holding together, fitting together, and making sense. Right at the end of that slide, I've got not making use of the required compliant device control. So if you're using Intune and you've registered your devices in Intune and enrolled them, you have a measure there with a compliance policy to say whether that device meets your standard or doesn't. So has it got the right OS on it? Has it got antivirus installed? Is it encrypted? Is it a minimum version of the OS, etc.? And you can use that to gate access to 365. So a really strong security stance would be to say, we're not going to let you access your 365 data or other connected applications unless you're doing it from a device that's owned by the company, is enrolled in Intune, and is compliant with the policy. So yeah, making use of those features is a really useful thing. Thank you. If you don't have conditional access, so it's not in every license, you've got a few options. So you can upgrade to a subscription that includes it. So that's typically Business Premium is where we see that. Also Microsoft 365 E3 or the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite as bolt-ons will give you access to conditional access, or just Entropy One if you want to do that. Typically we see at the smaller end, if you're under 300 users, Business Premium is that sort of value SKU that's going to give you what you need, and most people will go for that. And then at the higher end, you've got Microsoft 365 E3. So if you really can't fund those, you can't stretch to those licenses, but you want to do MFA, you've got a couple of options. You can turn on secure defaults in Entra ID, and that is going to make sure that every user in your tenant clears MFA, and they have to use the Microsoft Authenticator app to do that. There's no granularity, there's no further options. Very, very basic control. Any new tenant that was created in the last, I'm guessing 3 years, I guess, is going to be in secure defaults mode already. If your tenant was created before that, it won't have been. And finally, if you want to do MFA, but really budget is very, very tight, you can do legacy per user MFA, which is where you just go into each user and you say, we're going to enforce MFA, and you switch on MFA for that user. Obviously, the risk of doing that is you forget to do it while the user is being set up, and then people can just not use MFA and bypass that. Next slide, please.
So I think just to reflect then, Ollie, before you move on to number 3, and I'm not going to dig into all the different ways you can use conditional access. I can't remember if we've maybe got some other bits that touch on it later, but from my perspective, back in the day, you used to protect your data by putting a firewall in front of where the bad people were, and then you had all your data inside the firewall to make sure it was protected. With the fragmentation of data over multiple different systems, cloud apps and things like that firewall still plays a place, but it is only one area of protecting your data. And largely for Microsoft 365, you're not protecting your data with your firewall. There might be a few exception use cases with Zero Trust and Secure Edge and things like that coming up, blurring those lines. But for me, conditional access is one of those areas where it is effectively the firewall that you are putting around Microsoft 365, or one of the areas that is building that firewall in Microsoft 365. And gappy conditional access, I think, is often what we see, whether it's the elements that you've got here or things that people simply haven't considered. Often asking a customer, can someone log in from home? They kind of then go a little bit white and go, well, but yeah, kind of, and it needs a little bit more considering. So yeah, good points on conditional access there.
Thank you. So MFA being unhackable. So the journey of sort of MFA is, IT or security people asked you, right, we're going to put in a text message based MFA system. And then after a while, when actually text messages aren't secure, we're going to make you use the Microsoft Authenticator app now, or other Authenticator app, with a push notification, and you just say, I accept. And then they realized actually MFA fatigue attacks were taking place, where an attacker would just keep trying logging in and hoping that the user will get bored and press OK. So then we had number matching coming in. And now, there's MFA proxy attacks. If we can go to the next slide. So there's a form of attack on the basic MFA with any authenticator app. So this applies to any form of authentication from any vendor if it's just using a push notification or a push notification with a number match. But we're seeing a lot of attacks, things like EvilJinx and other attack frameworks or open source software or widely available hacking toolkits will enable this very, very easily. The way this works is somebody sets up a rogue website and they send thousands, tens of thousands of phishing emails to that website with something that might look convincing, like a user has shared a document with you on SharePoint, and it'll look pretty convincing. The user will click that link and they'll get redirected to that rogue website, which is actually just a reverse proxy from the Microsoft login page, and it's going to go and get your branding and your company name from that from Microsoft and present a pixel perfect login page that looks exactly like the genuine 365 login page. So the user then logs in to that page, believing they're logging into 365, and they supply the username and password. The attacker then passes that to Microsoft, which then sends a MFA request to the Authenticator app, which the user is expecting because the user believes that they are logging in to 365. So they willingly supply that number match to the rogue website, which then completes the cycle, and Microsoft then issues the session token, which the attacker then steals. The attacker is then that user. They've logged in as the user. If we can go to the next slide. So we're seeing quite a lot of that sort of form of attack. So what might the attacker do once they've done that? They've logged in as the user. They're going to want to persist their access. So they are going to register their own MFA authentication method, their own Authenticator app. In there, they might sit and wait, do some reconnaissance, look and find out about the organization, who is who, particularly who is in accounts, who might have access to an accounts payable mailbox. And they'll move laterally and try and do a phishing attack on people who have access to the accounts payable mailbox. That's the typical pattern that we see. Once they're into that accounts payable mailbox, they're going to create a forwarding rule from the inbox to a subfolder buried quite deep, and they'll sit and watch that like a hawk for new invoices coming in, and they then modify the PDF of the invoice and put a banner on it saying we've changed our bank details, in the hope that somebody then pays that rogue account. So that's typically the sort of thing. They might then be trying to do other forms of attack, ransomware and that sort of thing. But typically that's the sort of pattern that we see quite a lot. So what can you do to defend against that? So MFA, as we know it, is not 100%. There are other phishing resistant forms of MFA. So you can use actually passwordless authentication. So actually getting rid of the password makes you more secure. And that's tricky with hybrid identity. So if you've got Active Directory in place, that's actually probably not going to be the route you go down. But the other option is what's called passkeys. So traditionally that would have been a hardware token, like a FIDO2 security key or YubiKey. But now actually, since earlier this year, Microsoft have launched virtual keys stored in the Authenticator app, and that has gone live. So if the cost of entry to having a hardware token was too much, you can do this with the Authenticator app. So a passkey or a FIDO2 key is actually bound to the originating website. It's not going to work with any website or any authenticator other than where it's heading to. So if it's bound to the Microsoft 365 login endpoints, it's not going to work with somebody's phishing toolkit. And that will make MFA secure again, having gone through all that. So we find certain areas for certain industries where we can't give everyone a passkey. We'd recommend giving them to anyone who has access to the accounts payable mailbox, anyone with global admin or any of those privileged accounts. But if you can't give it to everyone, there's a few different things you can do. So we have a platform called Cascade Support M365, and that's powered by SaaS Alerts as a platform. When we set this up for a customer, we hook up SaaS Alerts to your tenant, and that harvests the 365 logs in real time and spots anomalies like users logging in from the first time on a brand new device from somewhere new. And it will learn where somewhere new is. So, you know, if somebody's seen a new device in the country that you don't normally work in, that might trigger an action. So these are automated actions. They'll take place during the night when there's no IT people around to look at it. But if there's an active attack going on, that can just thwart that attack by disabling the account, sending an alert to us, sending an alert to your help desk as well. So that's one line of attack that's blocked. Conditional access rules is another thing that we can do. I mentioned that when an attacker gets in, they're going to want to persist their access, and they'll do that by registering an Authenticator app. Or they'll try and register their own Windows device or macOS device if your policies allow that. So we're going to set up two conditional access rules, one of which says if you are trying to set up an Authenticator app, you have to do it from a known location or a known device. And if you're going to register a Windows, Mac, or whatever platform device, you have to clear MFA to do it. And having both those policies in place at the same time means that an attacker can't meet those requirements and they can't further their attack. So they are in for that session, but when that session expires, they're going to be kicked out. Next slide, please.
So I think from my perspective on that, it's the area that we're constantly hearing at the minute, Ollie, isn't it? In terms of if a breach happens, that MFA man in the middle attack is the one that is people have been susceptible to. People are very used to it now in terms of having to put the MFA in. They're used to maybe re-authenticating, and the threat actors are doing it in such a realistic way as you mentioned there. So I think really good advice across the board there. I regularly hear how our Cascade Support M365 has thwarted an attack and been able to block the user prior to it causing any problems from that perspective. So definitely something at the moment, being able to do the passkeys isn't something that everyone can do. And our Microsoft M365 does much more than that. So if you're looking across your organization, you're probably not giving passkeys to everybody. So it is then around what are the other attacks, what are the other anomalies in Microsoft 365. So yeah.
Cool. So historic enterprise app consent. So an enterprise app in 365 is a third-party SaaS application that has some relationship with Entra ID. And historically, up until about probably 2 or 3 months ago, Microsoft's default actually allowed, actually go to the next slide, we've got a screenshot of it. So the setting for app consent, the bit that's crossed out there, that used to be the default, which was allow user consent for apps. So that means a user would have been able to consent any third-party application to access any data in 365 that user could get access to. So we've seen it with remarkable tablets, sort of an e-ink iPad kind of thing there. We've seen that with in the legal sector, where a client goes into the law firm and says, oh, great, I can see the document you're editing there. That's on OneDrive. My device does OneDrive. I'd like to log in. I'd like to get access to that document if I can. Can we just log in on my Remarkable tablet? So the lawyer then logs in on the Remarkable tablet, and as many users do, just agree to any dialog box that pops up. So, yes, of course I agree. Yes, I agree. Yes, I agree. And in doing that, granted access to the OneDrive sync tool in Remarkable to be able to go and synchronize the whole of that lawyer's OneDrive to their client's device, who then walks out of the office with a copy of the lawyer's OneDrive on it. And that was enabled just purely by that setting, which, I don't know, this is just the primary bad default, I think, from Microsoft. Barry on the introduction said some of the defaults that Microsoft have aren't really helpful in terms of security. That's probably the number one. They have now fixed it. It's taken quite a long time to get there. So now that setting says let Microsoft manage your consent settings. It's equivalent to the middle setting, which is for verified publishers and selected permissions. That works, you know, things like LinkedIn, going and reading your name and your job title and that sort of thing, and directory information, not OneDrive data, not the whole of your mailbox, and not the whole of SharePoint. So that's good. That's in terms of analogies with stable doors and horses bolting. The stable door's been shut, but if you had that setting from the word go for allowing user consent, you might have some consents already granted in your tenant. If we can get to the next slide. Right. So that's the sort of list that you might see of enterprise applications. That's taken from our demo tenant, where we've got 78 applications. Of the ones I've seen recently in recent weeks, I've seen from like 29 applications being listed on the low end to I think nearer 300 on one of the larger tenants where the various grants have happened. So if you were to click into each of those, you'd be able to see if an admin has granted the consent there, or if a user granted consent. There's some tools in there to be able to go in and see, you know, who's been doing what, look at the audit logs, see who's logged in, who's granted consent, and what that consent is allowing in each case. And it could be as sort of innocent as, you know, looking at directory information, getting the email address of that person, and it could be as bad as, you know, reading the whole of OneDrive, the whole of SharePoint, that kind of thing.
I've had quite a focus on this recently. So we've recently done this exact piece of work here at Cascade, and we have many hundreds of applications listed in here. We're a tech company, so it probably is a bit of an expectation that we would have lots of integrations, but you'll be really surprised to see what's in there. I think you've got to pay a lot of attention to what is in there. I mean, if a threat actor was doing something, I would call it something very similar or the same, and go and do it. So certainly there was lots of things in there that seemed legitimate that I've kind of gone, but why are we using it? Do we need to be using it? Can we block it and see what breaks? Not necessarily the best approach in all organizations, but if you don't know what it is, it might be the approach to take from that perspective. By the by, if people are using Remarkable tablets these days, they do have enterprise administration now available to it to give you the confidence. Not that I'm a Remarkable user and I've looked into this recently, and I don't want people judging me when I turn up to their office with it. You can now control the access, but I think that is very important as well. Where devices are being utilized, we've not got to consider the user experience alongside the security. What are we going to allow people to do? What are we going to not allow them to do? And where can we be a bit more flexible if we can put the right controls in place? So yeah, I think these enterprise applications, I'd imagine a lot of people, maybe a number of people on this webinar, they probably know where to go and find this, but have they looked for it with an element of detail to see actually what is currently in there and actually is a threat actor already hiding in your tenant?
Absolutely. And you mentioned, Barry, about being able to turn off access. So there is a control in there to just sort of disable user sign-in. So if you're a bit suspicious about an application that you see in there, you can just turn off user sign-in while you do some more investigation, look and see what's actually going on, and then either re-enable it or press that big delete button at the top. But yeah, that's good. So not changing Intune defaults. So we're back onto the sort of bad defaults from Microsoft kind of theme on this one. If we go to the next slide, please. So I was amazed when I first saw this. It's like, that doesn't make sense. This is the default setting. This is how it comes out the box still from Microsoft. There's this one there, mark devices with no compliance policy assigned as compliant. So if you're not using Intune, a compliance policy is all about measuring settings on a device. Has it got the right OS? Has it got antivirus installed, etc.? And you're measuring basically to give you a red or a green light against each device. So this one, so Intune ships with no compliance policies at all. And it ships with this setting, mark devices with no compliance policy assigned as compliant. So out the box, if you just start registering devices without even creating a compliance policy, they're all just going to show up as green, and you've not measured a single thing about them. Even if you've created some compliance policies, we see a lot of people assigning it to a test group and not actually assigning it to all the groups. So very often we see sort of, you know, gappy compliance policies in place. So that is a really bad setting there. So normally when I see that, I'll then be going to the report section of 365, of Intune rather, to see how many devices have we got that don't have a compliance policy assigned. If that's 0, that's great. We can just flip that switch and put it back to the sensible setting, which is to regard it as non-compliant if there's no policy setting there. If there are some back in that report, then you're going to be on a case-by-case basis going to see why that device isn't compliant or hasn't been signed a policy. Yeah, let's look at the next one. So this is one that's also out the box. Intune will allow any user to register personally owned devices for any device type. So you can see on the right-hand side, there's a column there for personally owned. So personally owned Windows. I never entertained the idea of BYOD Windows. That's just a horrible notion. BYOD iOS and Android, yes, that's okay. And you may not actually need to choose to register the device in the tenant, depending if you're using MDM or application management. But yeah, Windows is always a no-no. I would never like to see allowed on Windows personally owned devices. So that's a setting that you can control. You can be very granular. You can give different people different settings, but normally at the basic level, I would normally like to see blocking any device platform that you don't use. So if you don't use macOS, you shouldn't have any business of having the ability to register a macOS device in there. So yeah, those are the two Intune bad defaults.
I think there's a whole subject on BYOD. You've touched upon a couple of areas now on that BYOD. So I'll wait till end. We can reflect a little bit on some of the more of it, so those BYOD at the end. But yeah, Ollie's your man when it comes to Intune. We've already mentioned if you're still using group policy, you've got to question why you're using group policy. How is it really protecting your organization today? And getting fully on board with Intune is the area that we see everyone is now either completed or they're done or they're on that journey. So yeah, certainly an area that if you're still to do it to its full extent, probably one to be putting on that journey for the future or the coming months to be having a look at.
Okay, mistake number 6, not changing your SharePoint sharing details. So SharePoint also has a inappropriate default in my mind. It's very open out the box. It lets you share documents, collaborate, all that sort of stuff. If we can go to the next slide. So this setting here for external sharing, that's the sort of master control for the whole tenant. So individual SharePoint sites underneath can have more restrictive settings than this optionally. Very rarely we see that's the case. Normally people will just go with one setting for everything. But what this setting does as the default, you can see there, users can share files and folders using links that don't require a sign-in. So with that, if someone creates a sharing link to a document, it's just a URL. Anyone in possession of that URL can access that document. So it means we're not actually verifying who is who. We're not authenticating the users. We don't know who the recipients are. So the recipient of that email that you send that sharing link with could share that with lots of other people, and probably they can have a big party in your documents and start editing, and you don't know who's making what change. So normally the recommendation there is to drop each of those, setting there for SharePoint and one for OneDrive. Normally both of those come down for new and existing guests. So in doing that, the workflow changes. When a user shares a document, they're going to get a slightly different UI. It's very, very intuitive, but it's going to ask, who are you sending this to? Who's the recipient going to be? And in doing that, that workflow is going to create a guest account in your tenant. So a #ext in your Entra ID that you've probably seen lurking around. But what it's going to do is make sure that you know who is actually the recipient of that document.
So SharePoint is pivotal to the success of Microsoft 365 based modern workspace. It is, however, an area where I see a lot of immaturity at present. I've already mentioned lots of organizations are still using their file shares. They haven't completed that migration to SharePoint. Lots of people have rolled out Teams in somehow, shape or fashion, but how are you reviewing it? How are you optimizing it? How are you seeing what is being used and what isn't being used? You've then got to look at your data strategy. So when moving your data from on-premises into SharePoint, what buckets are you putting things in? Who should be accessing what? Where are you going to make sure that you're getting the privileges? What should be able to be shared externally and internally? And the bit that we're now seeing is, where is the AI going to have the most use? Where are the crown jewels inside your data? Where is the information that people inside your business will be searching for or needing to help them in their job? Where do you want to deploy an agent that is going to help people be more productive inside your organization? It's going to help you scale at a more cost-effective measure. All of these things in SharePoint are really pivotal to this onward journey. And we're now seeing those organizations that haven't done this now falling behind when it comes to AI. So I think understanding what your journey is, understanding where you are today, understand how you're going to stop SharePoint being that pitching drawer full of old Nokia chargers and sellotape and drawing pins and things like that, as it gets so clogged up with years worth of history, is really important. Certainly, if anybody isn't yet registered for Define Tomorrow, our event in Bristol, 3rd of February, I believe, we have the fantastic Joy Apple flying in from America, and she's going to talk about some subjects aligned with this and aligned with how you can keep your SharePoint environment in tip-top condition to help with the onward journey on AI.
Thanks, Barry. So mistake 7, this is really 2 mistakes in one. So that's firstly using your day-to-day accounts for admin purposes, or using accounts synced from Active Directory for admin purposes. If we can just go to the next slide. So yeah, using the day-to-day account means that you're at risk if you're logged in as a global admin and you're just doing what you normally do, email and that sort of thing. You're at risk of accidentally clicking on things, accidentally making an administrative error, and accidentally allowing an attacker in from that point of view. So we always like to see separation of accounts, even with Active Directory. That's been a good practice. So the other part of that one is synchronizing accounts from AD. So if you're in a situation where you've got a hybrid identity and you have Active Directory on-prem, you're going to have some domain admins on-prem. And it's very, very tempting to then just make those domain admins global admins in 365 for the synchronized accounts. However, that's not a recommendation from us or Microsoft, because if somebody manages then to compromise your Active Directory, they very, very trivially got a nice easy step for them to then compromise your whole Microsoft 365 environment, just by modifying those accounts, resetting passwords, etc. And the other thing we see around that is actually shared admin accounts. So people having a non-named admin account that multiple people know the credentials to. And that doesn't provide any accountability, because if you look in the logs to see who's done what, you find pretty quickly that you don't actually know who's made those actions. Okay. Don't know if you wanted to reflect on that, Barry, or should we move on?
No, that's all good. Are we going to talk about PIM as well in this bit, Ollie?
Yeah,
or...
I haven't got slides on it, actually. I don't think. But PIM, Privileged Identity Management, that's a really good step that you can do. It needs E5 licensing or that level, so Entropy 2 or E5 licensing to do that. But what PIM does is we still recommend separation of accounts, but you'd log in with your admin account, and that admin account wouldn't be able to do anything until you have escalated your privilege. So you'd go into a website, which is actually the shortcut is just aka.ms/PIM. You go and hit that website, and then you then request for a period of time that you're going to be an admin. So it's this sort of principle of just-in-time admin and just enough admin, the two sort of principles there. So you have just enough admin to do your job, and you just have it for that period of time that you need to make those changes, and then that privilege is taken away. So we use this internally. So when somebody needs to actually elevate and do something to our own tenant, we will PIM. We will get access straight away, but that action is logged, and pretty quickly our service desk team is going to come on to us and say, have you just PIMmed? What was the reason? And we have to say, yes, it was us rather than an attacker, which is a really, really useful step.
So I think definitely this is an area that needs review in lots of organizations. We often see legacy support companies using one support address for everything. Everybody in the companies has access. How do you know that someone that's left that company hasn't got it? They should be using more modern ways to access. They should be using PIM and things like that to go and do this. I think using least privilege and zero trust methodologies, we need to review how we're administrating our Microsoft 365 and Azure and other environments from that perspective. Yes, it can create a little bit of it's another hurdle to jump over, isn't it, when you need to go and make a little bit of a change. But in the grand scheme of things, it's a lot more secure for even your administrators not to have administrative access. I believe you can equally put an approval process for PIM in. Yep. You need to think about that use case and how that's going to work with you. I know a number of you on the call, you might be the only person in IT from that perspective, but you need to think about how you're limiting your risk, limiting the attack vector, and certainly how many administrative accounts, how they're being secured. Have you got the FIDO token? Are you PIMing? All of those things will help you be a lot more secure and protect yourself from a deeper level of attack than you might experience otherwise.
Cool. Thanks, Barry. So final mistake of this presentation. These aren't in any particular order, by the way. It's not been building up to a particular thing, but adopting Copilot without checking for oversharing. So Barry actually hinted on this earlier. If you've got a very messy 365 environment with lots of data and not having good controls over who can access what, then Copilot is pretty quickly going to uncover that for you and let people search for things, and the results will come back based on documents that maybe the user didn't even realize they had access to. So the classic example is, if somebody has accidentally shared everyone's salary in a spreadsheet and it's been poked in a SharePoint site where it shouldn't be, and everyone has access to it. I think Microsoft have now put a protection in there that you can't just ask, what's the CEO's salary? But previously to that protection going in, it would have just dug that information out very, very simply. If we can just go to the next slide. So just having one Copilot license will get you a thing called SharePoint Advanced Management. And it gets you access to the data access governance reports that go with that. So it's a nice rich set of reports that will let you dive into your SharePoint environment and look at, on a site-by-site basis, whether they've got some of the looser sharing settings, like everyone except external users, as being a sort of very wide bucket, even anyone permissions, including external users, which you probably don't want to have, but it'll tell you on a site-by-site basis, how loose those settings are. There's some pretty rich reports in there. That's just one of the reports that we've got. If we just go to the next slide, I'll just give you a flavour. And probably, sorry, it's very, very small. You might not be able to see very much on there, but you've got columns there for things like everyone except external users, the count of people who've got access to it, the count of external people. Thank you for zooming in. Number of external participants, total number of unique permissions, and all sorts of interesting settings there. You can then look at that. It's ranked by the number, so you can dive into the top one and just look in further detail at what you've got in SharePoint.
Fantastic. So 8 of the top mistakes there, Ollie. I know you've got a whole bag of other ones as well that you regularly talk to people about from that perspective. But before we move on to the kind of main call to action, an area that I said that I just wanted to talk about a little bit, and that's that you bring your own device. A number of the things that you've spoken about today talk to that bring your own device policy. I've already alluded to the amount of people I speak to that you ask, could someone log in for home? And they very sheepishly go, yes, they probably could. So talk to me about the process of how people should be considering bring your own device. And I think one of the common mistakes is people will go, we don't have a bring your own device policy. Now, not having a policy and blocking people are 2 separate things, aren't they? So explore that a little bit for me.
Yeah, no, definitely. So yeah, very often we say, or even if you do have a policy, we see people saying, oh yeah, it's in our policy that people aren't allowed to use their own devices. Then you might dig into it a little bit further and see actually people are doing it. They have just loaded the Outlook app on their own device or other ways in, and or their personal home computer, and they're just logging in and accessing data on it. So yeah, just having it in a written policy doesn't really do very much. You've got to actually put an active block in there, and by default, Microsoft 365 is very, very open. It allows anyone access to data from anywhere, which is even one of the taglines that Microsoft have used to sell it before. But maybe you don't want everyone accessing all your data from everywhere. So having done that, I think you need to understand what some of the controls are before you make a policy. If you don't know what controls you have and what granularity you have, you're probably pretty quickly going to say, right, we're not going to allow BYOD at all. Whereas sometimes that might be pretty useful. You might want to choose for people to allow access to Outlook on iOS or Android and have that application, mobile application managed, or MAM managed. So that means that you don't have to actually enroll that user's device. You can just put settings onto that application and make sure that they can't copy and paste data, they can't save it locally, they can't synchronize their OneDrive to that personal device, but they can use that application. And more importantly, when that user leaves or loses that device, you can wipe the corporate data that's on it.
Definitely. I think some really good points there. And I think considering where you are with your BYOD strategy is really important. Maybe something to be discussing with Ollie there. So Megan, if you pop the final slides up on the screen for us. Thank you ever so much, Ollie, for your fantastic insights. Hopefully you found the content of this webinar useful. We've generally tried to share things that we hope are actionable. But we are happy to do a free Microsoft security and strategy review with you. We'll sit down, understand what you're using today, where the gaps are. We're actually using a new scorecard. So you will get a complete breakdown in core areas with how you're performing against recommended practices, with actions to then go away, take away yourself, or by all means, if you need some assistance, we can be there to help you. So you'll get a link to that. I think Megan's popped that in the chat, so you can go and do that. Highly recommend that you go and do that. Take a little bit of Ollie's time and understand how you can be best secured. The other thing that I would just like to offer to everybody on this call, and if you put count me in or yes please in the chat, I'm sure Megan can collect those details afterwards. Ollie and I have put together a tabletop security exercise. This is where we get a group of people in the room and we talk through a cyber attack, how it happened, all the different attack vectors, and then encourage a conversation around how could you detect that. We tend to do these events once, but we've now done it 4 times and sold out every single time. So if there's at least 6 people on this call that would be interested, free of charge, come and join us here, or if you're based somewhere else regionally, we can do it somewhere else. Come and join us. We'll cover some wider security best practices like the NCSE 10 steps. We will go through recommendations on how you should be creating your incident response plan, and then we will go through the cyber incident response story to start you thinking how you'd be protected. Then please let us know. It's gone down well every single time. Every single time we've done it, we've got great feedback. People have taken actionable elements away. So hopefully you find that useful. I'm sure we will connect out with you on that one. I hope you found the content useful of today's webinar. Let us know what else you would like covered. We want to make sure that we're giving you real value, that we're showing you ways that help protect your environment, improve productivity, and embrace AI. So thank you for joining. Thank you ever so much, Ollie, for all the content today. Thank you for Megan for hosting this event, and we look forward to speaking to you all soon.
Cheers. Thanks.